So welcome, everyone. This is Paige Nuez. I'm Director of Family Empowerment at RettSyndrome.org, and I'll be your moderator today. We're so pleased to have you with us for our RettSyndrome.org RettEd webcast, Adulthood, Living, and Lifestyle Options. We have an amazing panel of presenters with us today. And our board of directors and all of us at RettSyndrome.org want to personally thank you for all of your support and engagement. Rett syndrome is a rare disorder, and as such, continuous awareness, empowerment, and research is everything. I say that as both a parent to a beautiful 16-year-old teenager with Rett syndrome and as your representative at RettSyndrome.org. Education, connectivity, and advocacy are the ties that bind us all together into our very rare but mighty Rett community. While investing in research towards granting the ultimate wish of a cure leads us at RettSyndrome.org to focus a lot of time and energy in this arena, we remain steadfast in our concern with the health and well-being of our children today. And we know that many of our children are reaching or have reached adulthood, and that is a very important concern to our foundation and to you as well. We have worked to gather a wonderful panel today to speak both professionally to data and research that's being done about how our children are reaching and living into adulthood, as well as some parents who are both professionals and have a personal connection to Rett syndrome, and parents who have become professionals through their journey into adulthood to share some stories and insights and to how you might consider working with your child and with your family and with your community as they transition to adulthood. So we're very excited to get going on our talk today. It will be quick to get 4 speakers in and address your write-in questions. So let me give a little bit of orientation about the technology and then we'll get going. First point is the audio feed is open to our presenters only, so you don't have to worry about your background noise interfering with the presentation. If you look to the upper right corner of your screen, you'll see a control panel window. We invite you to type your questions or comments in the question field throughout the presentation, and we will answer these at the slide presentation, as well as the questions that were pre-submitted by you at the time of your registration. If we don't get to your question today, we will work with all of the presenters to get the write-in questions answered, and we'll post a question and answer document to our RettEd webpage once that's completed. If the control panel window is distracting to you, you can minimize or move the window, then you can expand it at any time if you wish to submit a question. Next point, this is very important. The session today is being recorded, and we will post a link of the recording along with the QA document to the RettEd webpage so you can listen again and share it with others. We know there are many people in your life who will be interested in hearing the information we present today. So again, the link and the QA document will be posted to RettSyndrome.org/RettEd. If you're having trouble hearing, please check and turn up the volume on your phone or device. So with this, I'd like to turn our thoughts towards today's topic for ideas of adulthood and strategies for achieving inclusion, fostering a wonderful quality of life during this important life transition. I'd like to introduce Jenny Downs, who is a researcher and longtime friend of RettSyndrome.org and of mine personally. Jenny is joining us from Australia, and it is nearing midnight in Australia. So Jenny, thank you for taking one for the team across our various time zones. We have attendees from many different countries around the world and across many states in the US. So I say to everybody, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And Jenny, if I can now, I'm going to turn the screen over to you and let you get started with your wonderful material.
Thank you. Yes, so I just click show my screen. Okay, thank you. Okay, so you're there now. Okay,
yeah,
we're there.
Now we can see your slides.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much, Paige. Thank you all for being here. I assure you all that I am very wide awake, and I'm very pleased to talk and to start our panel session and to start to sort of have a model of what quality of life is meaning for adults with Rett syndrome. So we're all very informed as to how Rett syndrome presents to the children and also to you as families. And we're all aware of the difficulties with functional abilities such as communication and movement and feeding, and also the other comorbidities that can also cause various health issues for the girls and for the women. But in parallel with those symptoms, that medical gestalt, we also observe, and we observe this on multiple occasions, remarkable capacities. And this is over childhood and over adulthood, where we see learning of new skills, enjoyment of activity, really winning beautiful smiles that connect and meaningfully with those in the community and in families to establish and maintain really important relationships. And this is all really the stuff of life, and this is really important because it actually leads us to this concept of what quality of life is, which is the feeling of satisfaction with experiences that you have in your daily life. And remarkably, in many areas of disability, it is often quite a neglected area, and yet it is absolutely ideal to understand, because if we can understand quality of life, then we can measure quality of life and evaluate treatments and supports, and we can also work towards treatments that will improve quality of life. So it's a really important concept, and some of our work, I have a team who's been working on quality of life, and so now I'll be able to share that with you. So we started our quality of life journey by conducting 77 interviews with families who have a child with disability, and the domains and these really rich stories, we asked really simple questions like, what challenges your daughter's quality of life? What makes it better? What would I see if I was there? What would somebody else see? Give me an example. And those really rich stories told us about the health and well-being aspects of quality of life in relation to physical and emotional health and feeling comfortable and valued. The activities aspects of quality of life, where those the girls and the women need avenues for communication and for movement. They needed stability in their daily routines, and also opportunities for independence and being in the community with connectedness and relationships. The natural environment came out extremely strongly, and having lots of different things to do. That's what we all need, but here we have a framework driven by the evidence from all these families, which actually makes those very powerful, because it then becomes evidence that we can act on. So when we had all of those interviews, we extracted items and we conducted various analyses, and we now have a 6-factor structure, which is the model which we will approach tonight in our webinar: social interaction, emotional well-being, independence, leisure in the outdoors, and of course physical health. And so we were able to create a measure for quality of life called QI Disability. And this screen now is showing you some of the items for health and well-being in relation to energy levels, being healthy and well, alert and sleeping well at night. And also here's some examples of some of the items in relation to family and friends, and expressing happiness when you're understood, being able to initiate greetings, enjoy being included, enjoy the social experiences of meal times. And this sort of scenario to, in our measure adds up. There are other items as well as the ones I've shown you on this slide, but it's adding up to the sorts of things we need to be thinking about when we're supporting and planning how the girls will be supported in their daily lives. So we then set about to see if these domains were indeed the same with adults, and we had conducted yet more interviews, and these were with 20 primary caregivers. All of them were mothers, and their daughters ranged in age from 18 through to 39 years. Most of them did live at home, and we had a range of different abilities and a range also of different medical complications such as seizures and complications. So we captured variability in these adults. So the same domains presented, and so that made us very confident that we really had captured a picture that was going to extend to adults as well with Rett syndrome. And for example, in relation to body pain and discomfort, here is a sample quote, and this one relates to gastrointestinal discomfort, and the biggest problems was pain and discomfort in relation to the gastrointestinal issues that this particular woman was experiencing, and that was what was the biggest sort of a distressing point often in her daily life. Communication skills were extremely important, with eye contact, with facial expressions, body language, having access to communication needs, so that indeed these young women could make their needs known. And just this quote is giving you some information about feeling observations of contentment and engagement and enjoyment and connecting with other people through augmented communication devices. And when it didn't suit her, that she would not be doing that, but here she was certainly very satisfied with the opportunity that gave her to connect socially. Social connectedness, again, being inclusive and being responsive and enjoying time with family members and other familiar people. And here is the very clear enjoyment of relaxation and smiling and engaging. And on the other hand, if that was not what she wanted to do, then it was very clear what she did and did not want to do. And that's important to realise that we need to help other people to understand when and how the young adults can be supported for engagement when they want to engage in activities. So a theme that came out very strongly with our group of primary caregivers with a young adult was in relation to the provision of targeted services, and their stories were often that of poor provision of targeted services. And so the particular quote is in relation to a young woman's difficulty in accessing dental services, and the mother was really very unhappy with her not being able to communicate that she had pain and discomfort with her teeth, and therefore not being forwarded up a waiting list and getting the services that her daughter needed. And this story was really a very important story for me to a motivator to work harder with this information, because this was a very real need that this young woman was not having addressed. And I'm pleased to say, down the track, this mother has continued batting for her daughter, and she now has had the dental care that she's needed, and she is a different young woman as well. So, you know, this was a part of the story was her empowerment at understanding her daughter's needs and then acting on it and not stopping until that they were addressed. So this then looks like a model that we can consider if we're wanting to help the young women to live their best lives, to live a quality life. And we need to think about their physical health and their emotional health. And we need also to think about social interaction, independence, and doing a variety of activities for leisure, including out in the outdoors. So I will start talking about physical health, and then when I hand over to my colleagues, they will pick up on some of these other important domains. But this graph that you are looking at now is showing in a group of over 400 young women with Rett syndrome in Australia and in from our Inter-Rett database also, and many of those young women were living in the United States. And you can see that we're seeing different prevalences of different aspects of those health issues, those comorbidities that I mentioned on the very first slide. You can see that sleep disturbances are occurred in around about 2/3 of all of those girls. Constipation was occurring in more than 80%, and seizures were occurring in slightly less than half So what I can see, I'm hoping I can see I can't see the arrow, but I think you can see an arrow. But here we can see that constipation in the adults with Rett syndrome was just as high as it is in samples that we have surveyed who are younger. So this is an ongoing problem through childhood years, but also into adult years. The other prevalences are slightly lower than we would see in our overall population. For example, we would tend to see that more than 80% of girls would have difficulties with sleeping at night. But here we see a little bit around 2/3 of adults are having difficulty with sleeping. We see a smaller proportion also for gastroesophageal reflux, down from around 40% to about 15%. And we also see a different prevalence for seizures, down from about 75% to around just under half of adults. And so therefore, some comorbidities seem to become less prevalent during adulthood. But of course, individuals have individual pathways. And so some will be improving and some will be showing little change, and for others we do see some adults who have some increasing in their seizures. So this slide is just summarising some of the findings from Holland, from Nikki Halbach's survey of adults with Rett syndrome, and here in her smaller sample, she had about 53. We had more than 400, so we just have a little bit more precision in our estimate. But here you can see there are women who may not be showing the improvements that the overall population might be showing. So this leads us to what we might be able to do for physical health, and we have to think of it as a toolkit. Regular checks with primary care, medical staff, as well as specialist staff are important. For example, maintaining regular immunisations as we do need in the general population, ensuring access to dental care, and possibly more specialist input for gastrointestinal support, and also clearly epilepsy support as well. And then the other aspects of the toolkit kit really come into day-to-day living, optimising independence, optimising inclusion and choice making, keeping to routines, which are often very comforting for individuals with Rett syndrome, having bedtime routines that are consistent with the notion of sleep hygiene. Most of the time, not all of the time, we can't be robotic in the way we conduct our daily lives every day, but we do have evidence that better levels of routine around bedtimes that are fairly strictly adhered to will result in better sleep. And also very strict day-to-day management to avoid or treat any constipation, and the best nutrition and the best activity that suits that particular individual. So coming back to the model, we've had some time now to have talked about physical health. And now I would like to introduce you to, in the first instance, Michelle Stahlhut. She is a physiotherapist by background. She recently was awarded her PhD, and her PhD study included an intervention study that was interested in supporting physical activity in children and adults with Rett syndrome, and there we will see some aspects of the toolkit to support variety of activities, including involvement in the natural environment. So thank you to Michelle.
Okay, thank you very much, Jenny, for this wonderful presentation and introduction. I was so lucky to have Jenny as my supervisor during my PhD studies, and I'm very grateful that both Jenny and Paige invited me to participate in this webinar. And today I will talk about the experiences and research from Denmark working with adults with Rett syndrome. So first of all, I would like to add that Denmark is a very small country in the Northern Europe with a population of 5.7 million. And in Denmark, we have one specialized center for Rett syndrome. At the center, we work in a multidisciplinary team. So we have a neuropediatrician and a clinical physical therapist, me as a research physical therapist, and then an educational psychological advisor and a nutritionist and social worker. And at the center, we offer lifelong follow-up. Most of the individuals, they will come to the center once a year or every second year, where they will go through a physical examination, and we will also assess their functional abilities. And also we will counsel on the different issues that parents and carers bring out. Our clinical physiotherapist and educational advisor, they also offer visits throughout Denmark. So they will visit schools and day centers and residential facilities to teach the staff about Rett syndrome. And also in Denmark, we have just 122 individuals that are diagnosed with Rett syndrome, and they are between 2 and 64 years of age. And 105 of them in this cohort, they have a MECP2 mutation. And so we have in this subgroup, 69 of them are adults. So a very large proportion of the Danish Rett syndrome population, they are actually adults. And you see here that most of them, they are between 18 and 49 years of age. So in Denmark, girls with Rett syndrome will finish school and special education services when they are around 20 or 21 years of age. And after that, they will attend a day center during the daytime hours, and often it's 3 to 5 days a week, and they will spend time together in a smaller group of 3 to 10 persons with similar functional abilities. And then during the week, the day center will offer different activities like music, dancing, arts, trips to the museum or concert, and also walks outside. And this is just a picture to show you what a day center could look like in a Danish setting. And also, if you remember or recall, I just mentioned that 69 were adults in Denmark, and 49 of them, they live in a residential setting. So the majority of our adults, they live away from their parental home. Often they move away from their parents when they are around 18 to 25 years. And here you see an example of a group home. So each resident has his or her own apartment with a private bathroom, and they have a common dining room and a common living room. So at the Danish Center, we want to focus on optimal health promotion and also enhancing the quality of life of those affected with Rett syndrome and their families. And from the literature and also from our experience and research at the center, we know that women with Rett syndrome, they are very dependent on their caregivers to participate in activities of daily living. They also have limited gross motor skills, and that they are at risk of a decline during adulthood. They are also at risk of high levels of sedentary time. In a Danish population-based study, we saw that girls and women with Rett syndrome between 5 and 60 years of age, they were sedentary 83% of their waking hours. And this is about 10 hours per day of sitting down. And in those who were older than 30 years, we also saw that they had increased amounts of sedentary time compared to the children and young adults. And also we see low levels of physical activity. So both in Australia and in Denmark, we have found a daily step count of about 5,000 steps. We also know that the participation in everyday activities and in community activities is restricted, but at the same time, they really enjoy physical and social activities, as Jenny just described. And these different impairments and restrictions, that they experience could have negative impacts on their health and on their quality of life. So recently in Denmark, we have focused on the development of and evaluation of an Uptime participation intervention. So this intervention aims at promoting light physical activities. So that is standing and walking activities that we call Uptime activities. So in this study, we wanted to reduce the time that they spend sitting down during the day. And the Uptime activities should be enjoyable and meaningful. And this really also relates to the different quality of life domains that Jenny just talked about, the variety of activities, but also social interaction. And in the picture here, you see a 45-year-old woman. She's walking in her walker to attend a music class at the day center. And she's also participating in the class while she's standing and walking. And usually before the intervention, she would be sitting down. And in the other picture, you see a 18-year-old teenage girl. She's not able to walk, but you see her standing here in a sit-to-stand chair. And in the picture, she's standing and listening to music videos together with her friends. So they take turns in choosing different videos. And in the study, we included participants living with their parents and also participants living in a residential setting. And they were between 5 and 48 years. So we included 8 children and 6 adults in this study. It was a pilot study, a feasibility study. And we also wanted to include those who could walk and those who could not walk or maybe walk just with maximal support. Our primary outcomes were amount of sedentary time and also steps per day in those who could walk. And some of our secondary outcomes were walking capacity and quality of life using the quality of life questionnaire developed by Jenny Downs. And the intervention targeted both the home and the daytime setting of each participant. And they worked on 2 to 3 different goals in each of these 2 settings. And I want to give you some different examples of our adult participants. So here you see a 48-year-old woman, and she is capable of walking just a few meters with maximal support. So she needs support from 2 persons. And she really enjoys social activities like going to the cafe at the day center. So this was a goal for her in her daytime, in her day center setting. And at home, we tried to make it, you see here in the video, we tried to make it a daily routine for her to walk to the sofa to get her evening coffee. And she's using a walking sling. So she walks 5 meters from her wheelchair and back again. And here you see her walking back to her chair. And in this woman, her sedentary time was reduced. On average, she reduced her sitting time with 18 minutes per day right after the intervention. And her quality of life increased with more enjoyment of social interaction and also a more positive mood. And moving on, this is an example of a 38-year-old woman. She can walk with one hand support. At the day center, one of the goals for her was to participate in standing activities. Like you see here in the picture, she's standing, participating in this board game. Or she could participate in a dance class while walking in her walking aid. So here you see, even though she can actually stand independently, they use this sling for precaution because she also has seizures, so to prevent her from falling. And we also had a goal for her to walk from the day center and to her home. It was about 200 meters there was 200 meters between the day center and her residential home. And in this woman, sedentary time was also reduced. On average, she reduced her sitting time with 16 minutes per day, and her daily step count increased a little with about 200 steps per day. And we also saw a positive change in her walking capacity, so she could walk a longer distance during a 2-minute walk test. But her quality of life did not change during the intervention period. And this is another example. This woman, she's 44 years old, and she can also walk with minimal support, so one-hand support. And at the day center, every morning, her goal was to walk around to greet all the other groups. And once a week, you see here in the video, she participated in race running. Oh, there's sound. So this is at the local stadium. And this woman, she was also able to reduce her sedentary time. On average, she reduced her sitting time with 20 minutes per day, and her daily step count increased with about 800 steps per day. And we also saw a positive change in her walking capacity, and the quality of life increased with more enjoyment of social interactions and moving her body. So this is my final example of a 29-year-old woman, and she's able to walk independently. At her day center, during the intervention, she participated in a physical activity class in one of the other groups. And at home, she had a walk buddy who came 2 or 3 times a week to take a nice walk outside with her. And in this woman, sedentary time was also reduced. On average, she reduced her sitting time with 45 minutes per day, and her daily step count increased with about 2,000 steps per day. And we also saw a positive change in her walking capacity and in her quality of life. She enjoyed moving her body more during daily activities and outdoor activities. So these are the overall results for all 14 participants. So for 8 children and 6 adults. And so you see here during a baseline period that we had of 6 weeks, the outcomes were stable. And then we did see significant changes after the intervention, and some of them were maintained at follow-up. So the intervention period was 12 weeks, and then the follow-up period was also 12 weeks. So on average for all 14 participants, the sedentary time was reduced with 4%, and that's about 35 minutes of less sitting time. And in those who could walk, the daily step count increased with about 700 steps per day. This effect was not maintained at the follow-up. And we also saw that the participants who could walk, they were able to walk longer. And the overall quality of life improved with 2.8 points on a 0 to 100 scale using the quality of life inventory questionnaire. Yes, and so to conclude my talk, the intervention that we developed was feasible, and it did have positive health-related effects also in the adults, and it provided a systematic framework for promotion of uptime within the natural environment of the participants. And we also believe that it could set the scene for larger studies, so that we hopefully can develop solid guidelines and recommendations regarding physical activity and participation. And we must remember that changing physical activity routines depend very heavily on the parents and the carers and the support from healthcare professionals such as the physical therapists. And also we have learned that health promoting intervention such as the Uptime participation intervention, they require careful considerations and balancing of the potential health benefits and available resources in the individual girl or woman, and the family, the staff, the specific setting, and also the community. So with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and we can move on to our next speaker, Teresa Bartolotta.
So thank you very much, Michelle, for that really inspiring talk and intervention. And thanks to Jenny for setting the stage with a model that we can use to look at quality of life in the adults that we care so much about. So hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be part of this panel today. My name is Teresa Bartolotta, and I am based in New Jersey in the US. And today I'll be talking to you about two different roles that I have. I'll talk about the work that I'm doing as a consultant to a program for research and support for Rett syndrome that my colleagues and I have established at Monmouth University in New Jersey, where I am a professor of speech language pathology, and I teach graduate students who are becoming speech language pathologists. And I'm also going to share my personal experience as a mom to Lisa, and that's my daughter Lisa there in that photo. She's 29 years of age and was diagnosed with Rett syndrome when she was 11. So to begin, I'll talk about what we've been able to establish at Monmouth University, and it's been a collaboration with the New Jersey Rett Syndrome Association. And NJRSA is a volunteer parent-run association serving the needs of individuals with Rett syndrome and their families in the New Jersey region, where we have approximately 200 girls and women diagnosed with Rett. So a couple of years ago, after working with NJRSA on educational conferences and some fundraising activities, my colleagues and I, specifically Patricia Ramshesky, who I work with at Monmouth, we were able to use resources from Monmouth University to establish this program in collaboration with NJRSA to really expand the kinds of services we were able to offer to the Rett community. So our mission is multifaceted, and we try to provide education and treatment for individuals with Rett, and I'll specifically address communication therapy today and social interaction. We also are providing information and support to their family members. And our mission is also to educate those who are working with individuals with Rett syndrome, either in schools, adult day programs, or in healthcare settings. And then since we are a teaching institution, we are committed to exposing our students to individuals with Rett syndrome and how to engage them and how to work with them. And we believe that this will help improve the quality of life for individuals with Rett syndrome who are in schools or in day programs, but it will also help other individuals with significant developmental disabilities and communication challenges. So we'll talk to you about some of the ways that our students work with the girls with Rett syndromes who we are serving. So at Monmouth University, we are now in our third year for our Rett program, and we offer an annual conference. Our first one was an interprofessional conference where we invited parents, teachers, therapists to come, and we covered a wide range of topics about medical care, rehabilitation, such as physical therapy and occupational therapy and communication therapy and AAC, to kind of set the stage. And the last year our focus was on augmentative communication. We had a conference on POD, which is one type of AAC, specifically targeted to therapists and teachers who worked with girls with Rett syndrome. And this year we will have a two-day conference on communication and AAC and literacy, and we're really excited about that. We also started parent support groups to bring parents together to talk about the needs that they have. And last semester we offered a talk on stress reduction using yoga. And then this semester we had a speaker talk about how to navigate the world of supports available for adults in New Jersey. And that was requested by our parents of our teenagers with Rett and also our young adults with Rett, because as I'm sure many of you are aware, it's often hard to navigate all the different systems that you have to learn about to try to get the appropriate services for your daughters. We also offer what we think is a really innovative program. It's a service learning project where our graduate students go to adult day programs and engage in peer socialization for individuals with Rett and then other individuals with developmental challenges who are attending these adult day programs. And this is not therapy, but this is social interaction. And it's an opportunity for our students to interact with these women with Rett syndrome who are their peers. They are their same age peers, and to identify activities where there is mutual engagement, mutual interest, and so that they can try to figure out how to improve the quality of life, not from a therapeutic standpoint, but just from a social and emotional support standpoint. And that's been really successful. We also are offering communication therapy, which involves augmentative communication at weekly sessions at our Monmouth University Center for Speech and Language Disorders. And for those individuals who are unable to travel to our center because they might be at a distance, we offer augmentative communication consultations with a speech language pathologist who works at our center. And what she will do is she will work with families and their daughters with Rett syndrome to try to help get appropriate communication programs started using any type of augmentative communication, whether it be low tech or high tech or a combination. And so we've been really pleased at that outreach we've been able to offer. So our communication therapy program is offered at our university clinic, which is open to individuals in our community regardless of disability. And so we serve currently about 55 clients a week, and they range in age from 2 years up until almost 90 years of age. And so we're serving individuals who've had, say, strokes and lost their ability to speak, individuals with stuttering problems or voice problems, children with speech or language disorders. But we've also tried to reach out to our Rett syndrome community, and we've been really pleased to report that we're currently serving 7 adults who are 19 years or older who have Rett syndrome who come for weekly communication therapy. And they are working with our graduate students who are studying speech language pathology, and they are supervised by experienced clinicians. And in this communication therapy, what we're doing is we are meeting those young women where they are, and we are working with whatever skills that they come to the therapeutic environment with. And in conjunction with their family, we work on advancing their communication using a range of strategies. And again, this can be low tech or no tech AAC, so that could be symbol boards, pictures, simple switches, all the way up to electronic dynamic display devices with speech output and eye gaze. And I have some videos to show you examples of what we're doing. We also focus on literacy activities as well. And most of our girls come for individual sessions, but we've recently started doing some small groups where we pair 2 girls together for some social interaction. So we're very pleased to report that every single individual with Rett syndrome who's enrolled in our communication therapy program has been making progress. Everybody is improving their comprehension and or their expressive communication using whatever communication modalities, augmentative communication, vocalizations, hand use, So all have demonstrated improvement. And this summer, we're initiating a case review study where we are going to be analyzing the progress on the goals and reporting on the types of outcomes that we've been able to achieve. Some of the things that we've been able to do is secure new augmentative communication devices for individuals who never had them before. And so our consulting AAC therapist was able to work with the families to get electronic devices for young women in their 20s who'd not used augmentative communication previously with success, and these girls are making really nice progress. We also provide consultation on managing devices, helping to organize pages, update software, training communication partners, expanding vocabulary, all to maximize communication. And we use a range of therapy techniques, including aided language stimulation to help improve comprehension and communication. And we have a focus on literacy. We believe that exposure to literacy is key, and we don't see a ceiling on anyone's abilities. We believe that regardless of age, there is always the opportunity for improvement and for increased learning. So now I'll share some videos with you of some of the types of therapeutic moments that we're offering. This is actually a videotape of my daughter, Lisa, working with her graduate student clinician. And as I start the video, I'm going to talk over it a little bit. Lisa does have some preserved hand use. So you see her she's actually trying to turn on the iPad by herself. So that's actually one of her goals because she likes to use her hands. You can see how much she enjoys her therapy. Lisa points to pictures. She also has a pretty good yes, no. She vocalizes for yes. But the therapist is trying to develop consistent use of strategies. So you'll see her now, she's working on yes, no with switches. She also has a symbol board. Good. She also has a symbol board on the wall for aided language stimulation to improve her comprehension. So you can see Lisa's goal is to improve her independence in accessing the device. So she can turn it on and then either choose a movie or choose a game, which is something that she gets a lot of enjoyment out of. The next video is a video of Michelle, who is a young woman in her mid-20s. She uses a Tobii Dynavox with eye gaze. She's been using Tobii Dynavox for several years, but when she came to our clinic, we found that she didn't have a good navigation system. She did not have a home page. It was hard for her to find the appropriate vocabulary she needed to access through really dozens and dozens of pages. So she's working here with her graduate student. See, so her graduate student is helping her. There you go. She's helping her navigate through the system so she can figure out how to access her vocabulary quickly and most efficiently. And here's another little clip of Michelle working with her grad student. So Kim is our AAC specialist, so she wanted to see Kim. She's also talking with her about going swimming, and her therapist asks her, you'll see in a second, about who she went with. So she can navigate to indicate she went with her mom. And then this is a really great story. This is Emily, early 20s, just got this device this semester and is using it so effectively. In such a very quick amount of time. So see, Erica, her therapist, models the language, puts sour cream, and then Emily right away goes to the device and finds those two icons immediately. And Emily's just had this device maybe 2 months. So we're really excited about the progress she's already made. And we feel the sky's the limit with her. So those are some examples of some of the nice outcomes that we've had at our program. I now want to switch and just give you a little bit of information about my daughter, Lisa, who's 29 years old, and she currently lives at home with my husband and myself, and she's attending a full-time day program 5 days a week here in New Jersey. And we have a caregiver in the afternoon and on some weekends to assist. Lisa is currently getting physical therapy at her day program weekly, and we've been very pleased that in New Jersey, the funding source for her budget has allowed now individuals like Lisa to get therapies as part of their adult programs, because historically therapies ended when the girls left school at age 21. Lisa has made, so she's continued to be able to walk and has continued to make progress with her motor skills. What they did several years ago was they started her on a walking and a hand program to improve her hand function, and that has continued to benefit her as she ages, and we have not seen any loss in any of those skills. She also engages in aquatics at her day program, and then comes to the MU Center for communication therapy. And now this is a little video that I made of her last month. You can hear me in the background being a cheerleader. This is something that Lisa could not have done when she was a teenager, but now at 29, she's able to feed herself fairly well using a fork. She does need some help with pacing, but I think this is a nice example about how it's possible to continue to gain your motor skills and not lose them. So I've been really pleased with the progress that she's made, and that came out of the hand program that was started by her occupational therapist when she was a teenager. So I want to thank RettSyndrome.org for the opportunity to present that information on our program and talk a little bit about my daughter, Lisa. And now I will turn the program over to our final panelist, Donna Witzleben, who is also a mom. She is a mom to Ella, and she's also been a great advocate for individuals with Rett syndrome, and I'm sure you'll enjoy hearing her story.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction, Teresa. Can you hear me? As
Donna?
Teresa told you.
Hi, Donna.
Hello?
Yeah, we can all hear you. Thank you.
Oh, okay. As Teresa mentioned, I have a daughter named Ella who has Rett syndrome. She was my fifth daughter of 6 children, and they were all daughters. She was born in 1966, which was the year that Rett syndrome was first identified. But it was 18 years before my husband and I heard of this syndrome. She was first diagnosed by the medical director of the institution where she now lives, and this was confirmed when their genetics department sent in a blood sample. She has lived from the age of 18 in an institution called Elwyn, named after the doctor who founded it in 1852. The first children were brought out from the city of Philadelphia to the suburbs in a covered wagon. It's a private, non-profit provider of services for the mentally impaired, which contracts with the state to provide services. Because Ella is now 18, she is supported by the government ICFMR Medicaid program. ICFMR stands for Intermediate Care Facility for the Mentally Retarded, which was created when the large state institutions were closed. Ella is now 52 years old, and she lives in a cottage on the campus. There are 16 residents in her cottage, both men and women. She can walk, and she enjoys walking around the cottage. She shares a bedroom with another woman her age. There are 2 kitchens, 2 dining rooms, and bedrooms for 8 residents on each side of the building, and they all share a large main room and patio across the back. There are offices for the head of the cottage, the nurse, the social worker, the supervisor of the staff, and for the psychology associate. I am free to call any of them at any time with concerns. Ella is transported to medical and dental appointments, which I'm free to attend. And on weekdays, she goes out to a day program. The newest building on campus has all private rooms for residents when they need nursing care. There's a physical therapy department with a workshop to customize wheelchairs for each resident. I am welcome to visit any time, which I do every weekend. Ella loves for me to come. I talk and sing to her, I play her music boxes, and I rub her back. Some days she giggles and laughs, and I take her out for walks, which she especially loves on a breezy day. Sometimes she does what I call her happy dance to music. Other days she might make noise that she's unhappy, and I'm able to comfort her. She puts her head over on my shoulder when we sit side by side. There's a large table in the main room full of toys. She has her own chair there, which is left far enough out for her so she can move in and sit into the chair on her own and play with her favorite toy, or she's free to get up and walk around. The families of the residents in her cottage, we families of the residents in her college have formed a family and friends committee. I was co-chair until my husband died, and I'm still an active member. We consider ourselves to be partners with Ellen, and we donate money, and we also raise money for trips and activities. We show the staff our appreciation with a yearly dinner and gift cards for Christmas and birthdays. I also serve on the Human Rights Committee at Ellen, which guards against the use of unnecessary drugs or restraints, the use of them to control behavior without an oversight committee. For 34 years, with her profound needs, she has been cared for on this campus. I first realized that she knew she belonged at Elwyn rather than with me when I was visiting one time on a weekday. Several residents were being taken to the medical suite, and I walked with her behind 2 wheelchairs being pushed by staff. When Ella and I began to fall behind, she started to cry, even though I was with her. She knew she was supposed to be with the others. It was a bittersweet moment for me. Getting to this point was a long road for us. First, we had to deal with all the effects of Rett syndrome, which you're all aware of, including self-injurious behaviors of arm biting and head banging, scoliosis, back surgery, seizures, so forth. She also wears leg braces. We had no family living near us for support, and we had a 6th child after Ella was born when she was 3. I agonized over what caused these problems in Ella, and finally one day I said to myself, it doesn't really matter what caused this. You have a retarded child on your hand, and what are you going to do about it? and I apologize for the use of retarded, but that's what it was called 40 years ago. There were very few programs at that time for mentally impaired children, especially in the state where we lived. Pennsylvania was the first state to have any programs for these children who were not trainable. When my husband was offered a job in Pennsylvania, we moved to this area. Ella was 6 years old. She attended special education classes, first in a church basement and later in a school building. She was never able to learn to talk, feed herself, or care for herself in any way. Her behavior became increasingly difficult. Our older daughters, who had been helpful, were going off to college. My husband was worried about providing for her, not only for his lifetime, but for hers as well, and was becoming depressed. He began to talk about placing her in a home. There were 2 well-thought-of homes in our area that we were aware of. One was Elwyn, but it served mostly higher functioning mentally retarded at that time. And the other was a smaller private home founded by a family for their daughter who had Down syndrome. They emphasized tender, loving care, which is what we wanted for Ella. We also knew someone on the board who was helpful in getting her accepted, as placements are not easy to come by. Ella moved to this home when she was 12 and a half. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. I could not visit for 3 weeks, and I thought I would go crazy, so I found a way to care for her by sewing clothes for her. I also wrote out all kinds of directions for her care. It turned out this was not a good place for her. Even though she couldn't talk, she let me know when I visited that she was unhappy by the sounds she made. And they started using some drugs to control her behavior, which had very bad side effects. After 6 years, they told us that they could not manage her anymore and she would have to leave. In the meantime, we had found a company that specialized in behavior training. And during this time, we hired them to staff a program for her in the home. And this turned out to be very successful. We also went to the county courthouse and filed papers to become her legal guardian, which meant that she could not be placed without our approval. And then we turned to the county for a placement, especially as she was 18 and we were no longer legally required to support her. My husband went to a board member where he worked to help get a placement for her. The county found an opening in a facility in Northeast Philadelphia where they placed the mentally impaired who had behavior problems. We went to look at it with Ella, and it became apparent to me that residents at this facility were people who also injured others, and I could not put my daughter in that environment. I refused the placement. The superintendent of our school district was furious because she thought the problem was solved, and the school district was still a funding, part of the funding component until she was at 21. So he was on the phone yelling at me on a Friday afternoon. We borrowed money to hire a lawyer and a social worker and to pay for the behavior plan. Our other daughters had to work during college, but they did qualify for financial aid as our medical expenses were so high. By this time, institutions like Ella were moving higher functioning residents out into the community homes and admitting the more seriously impaired like our daughter. When our school district finally agreed to pay for a one-to-one aide for the classroom, Ella was accepted at Elwyn as a student and a resident. I now live, I'm 85 years old. Yes, I am 85. That's correct, I forget that. I now live in a continuing care community, which I chose largely because it is almost next door to Elwyn, to their main campus, and I do not have to worry about getting there to visit. I've told you our history, not to discourage you, but to let you know to persevere and find something good for your daughter. It's also important to become legal guardians and not to put trust funds in your daughter's direct name. If you want government assistance, which almost everyone has to have, you have to be extremely wealthy to provide privately for your daughter through her lifetime. So those are some recommendations which I have for you, and I appreciate very much your interest and your listening, and to Paige for providing this format for me to speak about my daughter. Thank you very much.
Donna, thank you so much. You are quite a trailblazer in our community. You were advocating before you even had a diagnosis for your daughter, innovating along the way, at fighting for her support and her services, and you really embody the spirit of advocacy and the spirit of motherhood. Thank you for being with us today and sharing your story. What I'd like to do now is thank all of our speakers for keeping to such a tight time schedule. One of the benefits of this webcast environment is that we can field questions from our audience that have come in throughout the presentation. So what I'd like to do is invite Jenny and Michelle and Teresa and Donna to open our phone line right now and unmute your phones. And I'm going to read some questions that have been submitted from our attendees. And if you feel most well equipped to answer that question, please jump in. If we don't get to all of the questions that were submitted in the queue, there are quite a few of them. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will develop a question and answer document and post it to our website with the link. And again, this is just the beginning of an ongoing series of conversations we'll be having as a community about adulthood. And so if there are topics that are raised in our question list that we don't have an expert on the phone for today, we'll use it for indication for future speakers to come and go more in depth on our specific topics. Okay, so I have the phone line open for everybody. At this point, I'm going to put the screen on hold. Jenny, Michelle, Teresa, if you want to jump back to any slides, let me know and I can turn the screen back over to you. But let's get started now. Okay, so one of the questions, Teresa, you talked about this, is the potential use of eye gaze in our older population. So you've got some experience, you've tested it. Can you revisit that question, please?
So certainly, Paige. And so I'd like to begin by just saying that eye gaze can be developed, can be enhanced, can be targeted for intentional communication at any age. So there really is no threshold, there's no ceiling. What we do know is that eye gaze communication is one of the most preserved communication modalities, most available to individuals with Rett syndrome, where many of them have challenges using their hands, using their mouths to form speech, to communicate with vocalizations. The eyes are very powerful, and we also know that social interaction is very key for individuals with Rett syndrome. They, as Jenny presented in her model, social interaction is very important and is something that is not only preserved, but is a desire for individuals with Rett syndrome and so key to their quality of life. So eye gaze can be started with non-technology, with just looking at pictures, holding up objects. If you don't feel that an individual is consistently looking at something that they might be interested in, you can work there. You can give choices. You can start simple and then move to more complex. Some of the girls take very well to using electronic eye gaze, as you saw in that final video with Emily. But Emily did have non-electronic picture boards that had been presented to her during her life. So she did have some experience of looking at pictures for communication. But you don't have to start with something very high-tech or very expensive to begin to develop consistent use of that channel. So I hope that answers that question, Paige.
Great, thank you, Teresa. I think this is such an exciting area for all of our children with Rett syndrome, and it's very exciting to me to hear the opportunities for adults. And I've witnessed this firsthand at our conferences and in clinics over and over again. When adults have the opportunity to work with communication, extraordinary things happen. So we're never too old to begin, and we can't spend time. I think this is a message that I think is really important to parents, is as much as we can get trapped in feeling guilty about things that we haven't done, we have to set those worries aside and just say, what can we do today? And let's get started. And I appreciate so much you exploring this area and sharing information with parents of how they can get started today. And all things are possible. Very encouraging. Thank you. I'd like to go to the next question. And Jenny, Michelle, Teresa, you may specifically have some information about this question, which is that it was really encouraging that each of you touched on the reality that motor function does not have to be unavoidably lost with age, and that improvements can be achieved when the effort is made. And we know that's an important message, but we also know that many providers look for documentation to support that, so that we can appeal with insurance and case managers to access therapy and support after our kids age out of school or after age 18. Do we have any papers published at this point, or data that we can reference that can help parents advocate in this area?
Paige, can I provide
Please,
some
Jenny.
comment here? And I think the others might want to add, but we do have one paper, and I can email it to you, Paige, and it is where we looked at respiratory infections, and we found that that individuals who could walk independently had less frequent respiratory infections that needed a hospital visit. But what we also found, and we were surprised, but there was an effect where individuals who could walk with assistance also had better, compared to being unable to walk, had fewer respiratory infections. And that is getting towards cause and effect. Activity will help respiratory health and will have some impact on lower respiratory tract infections, and that's expensive. Whereas activity is still requires support, but it is a sense of well-being, not poor health. So I can forward that to you, Paige, and that can be available, I think, through you, perhaps, if that's okay. And then, of course, there's Michelle's work, which is, Michelle, you might want to speak to that, your work that is currently under review.
Yes, it's currently under review. I hope to have it out in about 3 months or so. So then it can also be made available. The study that I just talked about today, where you see less sedentary time and also more physical activity.
And the other thing I would say is that also the quality of life models that we have worked on, I can forward those papers to you also, Paige, but they can also be used. There are mothers here in Australia who have used the model as guiding their planning of the supports that would be approved by our government body, which is the same sort of thing that you're thinking of, and that they've said, well, our goal is to support an individual to have the best quality of life. So therefore, you can go through each of those domains and see how supports and activities are matching up. And it may not be, it has a moral imperative there, because we can argue that that is a very important aspect of how we live.
And Paige, if I can add that physical therapists and occupational therapists can write programs for gross motor skills, for ambulation, or for hand use to help maintain function, and also to help perhaps make improvements, as we've seen with Michelle's great videos. But then those programs can be carried out by individuals who are not therapists. So they can be carried out by caregivers or personal aides or staff. And so that can be a less expensive model where the therapist can do a consultation or a check-in over time as the person's skills change, but that the caregivers are really the ones who carry out the activity on a regular basis.
Yes, I agree with you, Teresa. I didn't really maybe explained it, but that's also what we did in the intervention study. So all the different activities, they were supposed to be very realistic and doable for the parents and the staff. So I totally agree that that's how it should be done.
Great.
Great, thank you. And I think that is applicable at all stages of life, right? Where we bring in the experts when we need, but really to preserve that quality of life throughout every day, throughout every week, month, and year, we need to train and develop the people working with our kids, whether it's ourselves or the aides and professionals. There's a big responsibility, and we have a lot of questions in the queue about that. If any of our speakers have suggestions about some best practices for training others. So you talked about the importance of getting that information, having other therapists write these reports and guidelines. But as a parent, what are some best practices you could recommend for getting that translated as our children go through life and the caregivers change and therapists change and placement changes? How do we provide that continuity? Does anybody have some good recommendations in that area?
Well, I'll start. This is Teresa. I think that if we can document a program, so either through a video of what an individual is doing or a journal, we recommend to our families that they keep a journal of how their daughter communicates, what different symbol systems she uses, what this means, what that means when she does this, and writing out a program. So having a written record is, I think, helpful. If you have a videotape that shows your daughter going through her physical activity or her feeding, self-feeding, or whatever you're doing, that this way that program can then be demonstrated to a new caregiver. I don't know if my colleagues have other ideas.
No, I agree completely with you, Teresa. I agree. I think, yes, documenting, and also, for example, sort of checks that activities occur in terms of like a diary that keeps an ongoing sort of a sense of monitoring of how those aspects of the program might be achieved in daily life as well would be very helpful.
I would agree. And this question, I think, particularly addresses transition time from school to day programs, to care in a home, to care in a residential setting, to an institutional setting. We also have a lot of parents that are asking about questions of continuity of care after we as parents may be gone. And I think that no matter where your child is in your life and how involved you can be in her life, documenting your goals and your desires for her is imperative. We've all been supporting our children from birth and through the regression period, and for many of our children losing their speech and ability to communicate for themselves. So we have all become incredible advocates, whether you realize that or not. And documenting that for others to provide that continuity of advocacy is incredibly important. There's a document called a letter of intent. There are a lot of examples that you can find on the internet, and that as you're working through estate planning, setting up a will and trust, a letter of intent is a very important framework for documenting all of those desires, whether it's her day-to-day routine, from everything from how to move her to her personal care to doctors and prescriptions. It's not a legally binding document, but it is, like I said, there's examples out on the internet that can give you ideas of all the important things that you are probably already doing for her every day. But if you can get them documented for others, that is one way you can feel confident that that continuity of care will be provided, but when you're with her and when you're not. And with technology now, the recommendations to take videos to show for our girls, a static picture can show when she's happy, when she's smiling, and what we call a regulated state. But to get a video embedded in that letter of intent will be really powerful for everybody to be able to see your daughter and her capabilities. Teresa, I just love to see that Lisa is acquiring new fine motor skills at this age in her life. That is just so powerful, and I'm glad we have that captured here in our webcast recording.
Thanks.
So yeah, I know you must be so incredibly proud. I'm so proud.
Well, you heard me. Yeah, you heard me on the video. I was quite a cheerleader.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the audio didn't come through on the videos that were played. So we can work to edit the recording afterwards to see if we can get some of those wonderful video clips that everybody shared re-edited back into the recording with audio. A lot of the many other questions in the queue are about securing her future as we age and become in a state where we can't care for her. Donna, I want to thank you so much for sharing your personal story. I know it's not easy. This journey is not easy for any of us, from the time of recognition that there were issues to where you are today. And I think we all want to applaud you for having the courage to share your story and revisit some challenges along the way that have probably been very emotional for you and very difficult. But it's a real testament to your strength and your advocacy and your love for Ella that has enabled you to move through these stages in your life and create a situation which I know I myself look to with some relief, to see that I can age with Katie. We can create a plan and find people that will be in her life that will support her. But it's not come without legal supports and protections that you've put in place along the way. And Donna, I was wondering if you would take a minute to share a little bit about the wills and trusts and conversations that you've had about the care for Ella in securing that.
Yes, I'll do the best I can. I haven't looked at my will or the trust for a long time, but what we did with the trust, I think there's what's called a special needs trust. You don't want to leave money directly to your daughter. because she won't qualify for government assistance, and if she's already getting it, they could cut it off. And a special needs trust will handle that. What we did is, because we had other daughters, we left Ella's name out of our trust unless all the other 5 girls are all deceased. And we're leaving money to them, and they know what it's for. It's for Ella if she needs it. It's for supplementary programs or staffing to help her where she is, or even to move her if need be. I think, and then if all of them are deceased, then it falls to her, and there's wording in there saying that it's a supplement to government support, not in place of, and so forth, that this is all supplementary things for her, which I don't think is very likely to happen, that all 5 will predecease her. But I trust them, and they understand what it's for, and I guess that's all I could say on it. I didn't think about answering that question.
It's a very good question, but thank you.
Well, I did want to add one thing. I know there was a question, and maybe you're going to bring it up, about dealing with behavior problems. And when we put in a behavior program and staffed it full time, it worked really wonderfully well. And the other thing that happened is, when she moved to Elwyn, she had had a few seizures when she was quite young, but it had been years since she'd had any. But she was put on a seizure med, or kept on a seizure medication called Tegretol, which also has the effect of controlling behavior to some extent. So that has helped her. And also there's a psychology associate in the cottage, and she keeps the staff appraised of intervention in case of behaviors. And you don't want to reinforce the bad behavior. I mean, sometimes you have to run and grab them if they're beating their head on a window or something, but you don't want to reinforce the difficult behaviors, the bad behaviors. You want to reward good ones. And they use a program they call Redirection, where they simply direct her to another. This is after they check to be sure it's not constipation or a physical problem that's making her unhappy. And when I was there last weekend, when I arrived, she was very unhappy, but she needed to have her diaper changed, and once that happened, she was quite happy. So she was trying to tell me something, that she needed to be changed. And anyway, I just wanted to add those things. She does have some communication skills. For example, when I was there on Sunday, she wanted to go for a walk, but it was raining. But she goes to the door, and there's a window in the door, and she stands there to go out, and she won't budge. So when I try to move her, she's immovable, and she's trying to tell me I want to go out, for a walk. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to take too much time sharing on other things here, so I'll just try to go back to the other questions. Thank you, Paige.
Thank you, Donna. I really appreciate your sharing your experience of behavior modification with Ella and giving her supports, and differentiating between what could be a medical issue and then addressing behavior and communication and frustration. We've had many talks from Dr. Percy, Jane Lane, that families can reference, but really the short answer, and there is no short answer in Rett syndrome, but the short answer about behaviors is we always say, work with your physician to first rule out medical issues that she could be trying to communicate about, especially if you see a sudden change in behavior that was not present before. Many times behavior is an expression of pain, and we don't want any of our children to be in pain. if you go through and eliminate all of the common issues that could be causing pain, from a dental issue to a GI issue to a contracture of any kind of physical ailment, we have to do usual adult screenings in our adult women with Rett syndrome that we would do. They're subject to all of the normal issues that come with adulthood and aging that all of the rest of us are. So regular screenings are important. Imaging, testing, all of those things. When you roll those out and you still see sudden behaviors, we have to think about what's changed in her life. Has there been a big change? If you have a loss in your family, she might be experiencing trauma over that loss and that change in her situation. And so bring in a therapist, a psychologist to help work through emotional changes. And if you go through the whole list that you would for anybody who seems to be feeling pain or expressing sadness or having frustrations about not being able to communicate well, and you still are seeing behaviors, then it's fine to turn to medications. And Donna, thank you for sharing that over the course of Ella's life, she tried some medications that had some bad side effects, and you found some medication that helped her feel more calm and at peace. And that's really what we want for our girls. But first, try to work with your experts to make sure that she's not trying to communicate something that can be solved without medication. We are at the end of our time today, so I want to summarize a few questions that have come in. The majority of individuals with Rett syndrome are girls, and as they age from childhood to adulthood, there's the onset of puberty. There is the onset of menopause at the end of their life. We have a lot of questions about how to manage all of those hormonal changes in our women. And I'd like to refer back to a wonderful webcast that we have on puberty and adulthood, a lot of information about that transition from puberty to adulthood to menopause by Jane Lane that was done in March of 2018. The link to that webcast can be found on our website. Also about the questions about planning for the future, securing your estate, providing a will and trust, writing a letter of intent, were all captured very nicely by Marianne Ellert in a webcast that we did in October, just a few months ago, and that link is also on our website. And we can invite Marianne back to speak with us specifically about some questions about end of life. There were also, in securing that future and preparing guardians, looking at trustees and how the courts could get involved if you don't take this issue head on and prepare for it. It's inevitable. None of us know what tomorrow will bring, and we will all sleep better at night if we know that there is a plan in place for our children. There were also a lot of questions, let's see, about puberty, adulthood, estate planning, planning for the future. Also about what if our loved one passes on before us? Are there any research options? Can they contribute to organ donor programs? There's nothing inherent to Rett syndrome that impairs her medically. And if that is something that you choose, at the time, speak with the hospitalist and with the hospice care team about making organ donation for her as you would for yourself. We also have a research repository for Rett syndrome. And if you're interested in doing brain donation for your child, you can contact me offline. I manage that program for our Rett syndrome community, and that is an incredible gift. And we do work with Harvard University, with Harvard to make that information and repository available to all research scientists in the community, and we appreciate that. That's a tough topic, but again, if we don't talk about things, then the fears and anxieties build up. So I want to really thank all of our presenters today for tackling this. I know a lot of the topics are uncomfortable, cause anxiety, can cause fears, but by talking them through, sharing examples of success, of skill acquisition in adulthood is so exciting and empowering. sharing some practical tips of how we've translated that belief that our adults can learn new skills and develop relationships and have a positive experience outside of our home are all empowering, and sharing the practical information of how to translate that and make that work legally and with continuity is empowering. And again, it's just the beginning of our journey together. So at the close of our talk today, I want to thank all of our panelists, both in the US and in many countries around the world. Tomorrow is Mother's Day, so I'd like to take this opportunity to wish you all a very happy Mother's Day from RettSyndrome.org. We celebrate all of you. The majority of our attendees today are moms, but if you look at this slide and this, I love this quote from Sophia Loren, who says, "When you are a mother, you're never really alone in your thoughts. A mother always has to think twice, once for herself and once for her child." I don't think that Sophia Loren had a child with Rett syndrome, but she very well could have, because that quote is no more relevant to anyone than to us. And I would insert fathers into that quote, and I would insert siblings. I think that it's an important message for all of us and really captures what we've tried to address today. So I just wanted to share that wish that all of you, if you don't have someone to be with you tomorrow, think of me being with you and celebrating you and all of your accomplishments. You're strong enough for this, and we will do it together. I also want to share that we have continuing opportunities for education. In the US, we are doing in 2019 single Saturday education days around the country. We already had a successful one in St. Louis and recently in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our next one is coming up next weekend in Pennsylvania. You can visit our website and click on rettsyndrome.org/eddays2019 to see the upcoming cities and see links. This webcast environment is wonderful. It reaches people all over the world who don't have the opportunity to get together locally, but nothing can replace the empowerment of being together face to face. And we're trying to continue to provide forums for that informal meeting with experts and with each other. And Donna, I look forward to meeting you in Pennsylvania next weekend.
Yes.
And coming up after that will be Boston in June, the San Francisco Bay Area in July, a meeting in Portland, Oregon in August, and Teresa, you'll be hosting a get-together at Monmouth University in New Jersey in October. So those are just some opportunities through RettSyndrome.org in the US that you can get together with families and with experts, and I hope to see you all at one of those. And if you're outside of the US, I know many of the country associations provide conferences and family days and education days in your country. So stay in contact with your local country level parent association. And if you don't have one, consider traveling to the US. We'd love to have you. Please join us next month for our RettEd about nutrition strategies in Rett syndrome. Susie Geertz, who is an eminent nutritionist and dietitian working with Dr. Percy at the University of Alabama, will be talking about nutrition strategies on Tuesday, June 11th, and that will be back in this webcast environment. And I know she will be talking about our adults with Rett syndrome and how their nutrition and dietary needs change as they age as well. And we're going to ask all of our speakers as we move throughout our monthly calendar of webcasts to always sort of differentiate our knowledge about pediatrics versus adulthood in their talks. So please, even if adulthood is not in the talk title, come back for our future webcasts and go to our website and access the ones from before. Okay, so I apologize if we didn't get to a question that was in our queue. As I promised, we will take these questions as a team. We will write up a QA document and post it to our website along with the link to this recording. I think the questions of how do you provide continuity of training to people in your child's life as there's staff turnover, this recording, I hope, will help you with that. You can share this link freely with anybody in your child's life to watch pair it with a letter of intent, pair it with videos that to you demonstrate communication and motor skills and all the vision that you have for her, and you'll be well on the road to a good quality of life for your adult with Rett syndrome. Jenny, Michelle, Teresa, Donna, thank you for being with us today. Your commitment to the children that you've known, to your own children, is helping us all make exceptional progress in putting our dreams for our children into a plan of action. And I'm really grateful to you and all of the work that you do and for the hope and inspiration that you provide to all of us. So thank you. All right, so please take the time to email me with comments and feedback so that we can fine tune our future offerings. We appreciate it. We appreciate you. We hope to see you here next month. And we wish you all a happy Mother's Day. And if we don't talk to our dads, we wish you all a happy Father's Day next month. Thank you. And this concludes today's webinar.